Hi, my name is Peter O'Neill. I'm a husband, a father of three, a grandfather. I'm a retired attorney. I'm an amateur musician, and now I'm an author because at 65 I was diagnosed as autistic. I don't like using air quotes, but I also don't like the word diagnosed in this context. I was identified as autistic by a psychologist. And it wasn't something that I sought out. I got lucky, had gone to a couple of psychologists, first before COVID and after COVID, not to learn whether or not I was autistic. I'd already ruled that out. But to find out why my life as a young man had been so different and sometimes so difficult. And it took this second psychologist about 10 minutes to say that she was going to send me home with a book. It turned out to be a book about neurodivergent people, these very capable neurodivergent people, women. And I fought it because, as I say, I'd ruled out the idea of being autistic. I'd once watched a television show that featured some autistic people, and most of them didn't really ring any bells for me. But there was one man, a middle aged man about my age, expert at what he did, who didn't know he was autistic, but we, the viewers, were supposed to see it because we'd been watching this show for a time, for several years before this character was introduced. And I saw something in that character that made me pause the television show and get out my trusty laptop, which is always with me because I'm autistic, and start looking up what it means to be autistic. And I Googled what I could find, the DSM 4 or 5, things like that. And what I found, everything that I found, was so negative, so pejorative that I ruled it out. I said, this isn't me. It talked about autistic people lacking empathy. It talked about them being unable to understand sarcasm. And my entire career had been built on empathy and a sense of humor. And so I just said, no, this isn't me. I may have some of these features. I have a hard time maintaining eye contact, especially it turns out with a little lens in a computer screen. But I didn't see myself in those things. So I said, no. But this psychologist saw something in me very quickly, sent me home with a book about neurodivergent women. And the book didn't exactly do it for me. And so I started doing what I do. I started autistically researching what it means to be autistic, looking at YouTube, looking at TED Talks, Googling everything I could find, going to the library, finding books, ordering books online. I was particularly drawn to the memoirs that I could find. And little by little, I started seeing myself in all these different portrayals, a bit here, a bit there, a bit over here. Each person would bring something new to the table. And slowly, I started actually embracing this idea that I'm autistic, loving it. It brought a lot of joy to my life, to be honest, because for the first time I understood my life. I understood the really good parts, and I also understood some of the difficult parts, some of the things that had brought me to a psychologist in the first place, because what I was trying to understand was why my young life had been so different. I was an interesting, funny, smart guy. Um, it's hard to believe now. You look at this old guy with jowls and wrinkles. But at the time, I was pretty good looking. I would draw people to me. They'd want to find out who this guy was. But whereas I was very good at exploring the world around me, learning everything I could about art and music, literature, reading, writing, traveling, seeing the world, absorbing everything I could, I was terrible at keeping these people in my life. I had no understanding of the kind of reciprocity it took or it takes to keep people in your life. They would come to me. I'd enjoy it while they were there. We'd enjoy each other. And then they'd kind of skitter past, like, I'd say in my book, like dry leaves that kind of catch on you for a few minutes and then, or a few seconds and then blow away. I didn't know how to keep them. So I spent a huge part of my young life almost completely alone. I had a couple good friends. I had my family, and that was kind of it. I could go to work or to school and engage with people reasonably well, but I couldn't keep them in my life. And that was always a big mystery to me. Well, I started learning about what it means to be autistic. And as I embraced this, I started to realize that even my career, I had an accidental career as an attorney and paralegal before that. I was really good at it. I could go through warehouses of photocopied documents. I could find the needles that these companies tried to hide in these haystacks of paper. Later, digital haystacks of PDFs that you had to open one at a time. Well, I could find their secrets. I could absorb a huge number of facts and put them together. Sometimes it was almost intuitive, my ability to look at the beginnings of a story and see where the end was going to be. I could work very creatively, always surprising these people with exhibits that I created, that sort of thing. And I loved it. I had this intense focus that I could put onto my job, onto the work that I did. And so as I read what it was to be autistic, I suddenly realized that my whole life made sense for the first time. Well, what I ended up doing was writing a book. It's called My So-Called Disorder, Autism, Exploding Trucks, and the Big Daddy of Rock and Roll. The Big Daddy of Rock and Roll, you would learn if you read the book, is the great Chuck Berry. And when I was a kid, my brother Steve had talked about this man. And for some reason, when I was 12 or 13 years old, I absorbed Steve-O's words. Steve-O, undoubtedly autistic himself. And he was a master of pop culture of the time, and even the times that preceded us, because we were sort of from the hippie generation. I was a little too young for that, but still dressed the part. And Steve-O knew about the culture that preceded that people like the Frank Sinatras or Sammy Davis Jr.'s, Jackie Gleason's of the world. But he told me about Chuck Berry, and I listened. And later on, I saw Chuck Berry, and instantly, my entire life changed. I saw this man on stage, alone with his guitar and a local pickup band that backed him up. And there was something about that performance and that presence that drew me in and changed my life forever. For years, Chuck Berry was all I could talk about. I bored people senseless with stories about Chuck Berry. Eventually, I learned you have to talk less about Chuck Berry. It would be smart because people don't want to hear this much about Chuck Berry. And I did. And I've learned since. That's what we call masking. It's what autistic people always have to do. We have to hide our differences, our intense, passionate interests in things. We have to pretend more that we can make eye contact easily, that we have to learn how to smile. I would practice in front of a mirror. If I'm really smiling, it comes out great. But if I try to smile, it's the phoniest looking thing you could ever imagine. Well, all these things I started reading about in bits and pieces, I found out I was not alone. And so I realized I had to write this book. And I had to write it for another reason too. As I learned more about people just like me, autistic people, bright, smart, educated, autistic people, I learned that a huge number of us were either unemployed or underemployed, or had trouble finding or keeping a job. Maybe we weren't that great at interviews. Maybe we aren't that great at the office party. We kind of stand in the back and observe. Who knows? But maybe it's the environment of the office. It's difficult for many autistic people to stand the things that distract us, or the noises or smells that are in the office place. But what I wanted to explain was how valuable neurodivergent autistic people can be to any human endeavor, whatever it is, wherever we're drawn. My life as a paralegal and as an attorney was a complete accident. It wasn't something I would have chosen. I would have chosen to be a musician like Chuck Berry, or a writer like I'm trying to be now, or some sort of artist, even a painter or whatever. That's what I wanted to do. But I found an outlet by accident that I was really good at. And that was this ability to amass these facts, to understand and to master them, to know the story of my cases better than anyone else on the case ever would. I could take on some of the biggest corporations in the world, General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, Hyundai, and I could beat them essentially because I could learn the facts better than their witnesses. So I was good at what I did. And I wanted to describe that in a book, and that's what I've tried to do. And as I started describing that in a book, I realized, well, I also had to tell some of the more difficult aspects of being autistic, which for me ended up being in the social realm, still are. And I've written this book and I want people to know about it. I've given some talks, I have written articles about it, but now I'm starting what I consider my digital book tour. I'm creating this video in the hopes that someone like me, like you, might actually be doing their autistic research and find this video and want to learn more about my story. There's a saying that we all know that if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. We're all different, but we all share so many attributes. And so it's by dipping into every person's story that I think we can really find ourselves and learn what this means to be neurodivergent, to be autistic, and how valuable we are to the world, and as I say, to any human endeavor. So I'm creating this video as kind of a note in a bottle that I'm tossing out there in the digital ocean, hoping that someone like me might find it, someone who perhaps is autistic or neurodivergent or knows someone who is. I think it's kind of funny. I think it's an easy read. I think it's well enough written that I'm proud enough to put this video out there and try to encourage people, buy this book. And I'm going to keep making these videos, keep tossing them out there on the ocean waves. But if you happen to like the video, press like. If you've got comments, make comments. If you see something in my story that's similar to yours, tell us, let us know. If you can share this video, please do. And I will see you next time.